Nice guys finish last, a phrase that has been echoing in our ears for decades. But what exactly does it mean? That by being kind and generous, we are doomed to failure? It's an uncomfortable truth, isn't it? In a world where the values of assertiveness, power, and achievement are exalted, those who seek to please, avoid conflict, and put others first often find themselves on the sidelines. Have you ever felt this way? Maybe you tried your best, you were kind, understanding, patient, and in the end, it seems that it all wasn't worth it. In fact, what we see most are stories of people who, in the effort to be good, end up losing themselves. What is wrong with being kind? Why does this kindness often fail to result in recognition or genuine happiness? The sadness of a nice guy is the feeling that, no matter how hard he tries, something always slips through the cracks. Maybe the problem lies in his own perspective. The idea that being good enough for others would be enough to secure his place in the world. But this ideal is flawed. Perhaps the real issue is not that nice guys fail, but that they are not playing the game of life by the right rules. These issues are not new. They are explored deeply in Dostoevsky's work, where characters like Prince Myshkin, the idiot, embody the archetype of the nice guy in all its tragic complexity. And by looking at him, we begin to see that goodness is not a weakness, but something much more complicated than it seems. Do you remember how many times you have put the needs of others before your own? How many times have you sacrificed yourself, giving up what you wanted in favor of someone who, in the end, seemed not to even notice your effort? The cycle of self-sacrifice is a subtle and, at the same time, overwhelming trap. You give of yourself, you make an effort, you put yourself in second place, believing that the reward will come with time. However, what you realize with pain is that, in the end, your dedication is ignored or even devalued. This happens with alarming frequency, doesn't it? The expectations created around what is good and right end up becoming a burden, and the constant search for external validation creates an ever-deepening void. The idea of being a good person, someone who puts others above themselves, ends up being distorted into a version of yourself that is not true. When you do everything to please, you lose your own meaning. And the worst part, when recognition doesn't come, feelings of frustration and disillusionment set in, leading to the question, why am I even trying? The pain of the nice guy is not just that of being ignored, but that of being forgotten, of being someone whose kindness is seen as an obligation, not as a genuine gift. He sacrifices himself not because he wants to, but because he believes that this is what is necessary to be loved or appreciated. But isn't this expectation wrong from the beginning? Constant self-sacrifice without reciprocity creates a disconnection from oneself, from others, and from what one really wants from life. And this disconnection is what keeps the cycle going. The tragedy of it all is that when the needs of others become a priority, you find yourself losing your identity. And recognition, the one you desire most, always seems to be just out of reach, like a distant mirage. It's not just the lack of recognition from others that hurts, but the silence of your own soul, which gets lost in this endless game. What if I told you that no matter how much you sacrifice, no matter how much you do for others, you will never be truly happy until you learn to see yourself in a different light? Maybe you have realized this, or maybe you haven't yet. But the truth is that behind all this generosity, kindness, and sacrifice, there is a person who got lost somewhere along the way. And it is this person who needs to be found again. The difficulty with nice guys is that they confuse their kindness with their identity. They believe that being nice is all they are, and that this kindness will always be enough to find what they want in life. However, what they don't realize is that, in their incessant search to please others, they forget who they really are. They become like a distorted reflection, a fragmented being who lives to satisfy the expectations of others and not to live according to their own needs and desires. This is the crucial moment of a journey. Awakening. The moment when you begin to realize that being nice is not everything, and that your kindness, however valuable, needs to be balanced with a deep respect for yourself. It is only when you begin to put your own desires and limits ahead of your need for approval that you truly begin to understand yourself. The metaphor here is that of a broken mirror. The nice guy has looked into that mirror for so long and seen a reflection that did not correspond to his true essence. He saw only what others wanted to see, someone generous, willing, always there for him. But now it is time to look again, honestly, without illusions. And what he will see, when he looks within, is the truth. He needs to recognize himself as a whole being, with his own needs, dreams, and, yes, limits. And here, the big question arises. Who are you really, beyond your desire to please? The answer does not come easily, but it is therein lies the power of change. The path of self-discovery may be challenging, but it is the only path to true freedom and authenticity. Now, to understand the journey of the nice guy more deeply, let's go back in time to Dostoevsky's masterpiece, The Idiot. If there is one character who perfectly embodies the pain of the nice guy, it is Prince Myshkin. Myshkin is not just a kind man. He is, in essence, the archetype of the too good, the one who does not know how to protect himself, the one who believes that kindness is an absolute virtue and that life in its purity is better when lived without artifice. Myshkin is someone who, in his naivety, seeks truth and honesty in all aspects of life. He is a pure soul, without malice, trying to navigate a world he does not understand, where malice and selfishness prevail. He sees the best in people, even when they do not deserve it. He tries to save those around him, believing that kindness can transform the world. And like any nice guy, he gives himself without reservation, not realizing that life is often not a direct reflection of what you give to the world. But Myshkin's tragedy, like the tragedy of many nice guys, is that the world does not respond to his kindness with gratitude. Instead, he is exploited, misunderstood, and ultimately neglected. What Myshkin fails to understand is that in his quest for purity and sincerity, he makes himself vulnerable, defenseless in a world that does not value these virtues. He sacrifices himself, loses himself in his own purity, and in the process becomes consumed by his own illusions. The tragic irony of Myshkin's story is that although his kindness is genuine and deeply human, it is not enough to protect him from the pains of life. In the end, he is defeated by the very purity he believed to be his strength. He becomes an idiot, not because he is stupid, but because, in his absolute honesty, he fails to perceive the complexities and cruelties of the world around him. Myshkin's pain is the pain of many of us. The idea that pure, unfettered kindness can save us. But instead, it leaves us exposed, vulnerable to the selfishness of others. The path of kindness, without a critical and realistic view of the world, leads to loneliness and despair. Now that we look at Myshkin and his tragic journey, it is impossible not to ask ourselves, how can we avoid making the same mistake? How can we prevent our pure kindness from becoming a weakness, an opening to suffering in a world that is not always grateful or understanding? The answer is not simple, but Myshkin's lesson is clear. We cannot live our lives naively, believing that kindness alone will be enough to guarantee happiness or fulfillment. Myshkin's mistake was, in part, his failure to realize the limits of his kindness. He believed that love and honesty could heal any pain, transform any reality. However, he failed to realize that the world is not a reflection of his intentions, but rather a place where others have their own motivations, desires, and egos. He failed to understand that true wisdom lies in recognizing when to give, but also when to preserve. True kindness is not the kind that sacrifices itself endlessly, but the kind that has healthy boundaries and is able to protect itself without losing its essence. Now, the challenge for those who, like Myshkin, find themselves lost in their own goodness, is to learn to discern the right moment to act. The change is not in abandoning goodness, but in shaping it in a more balanced way. Instead of being like Myshkin, who gives himself without limits, you must learn to be more aware of yourself, of your own wants and needs. To be kind, yes, but also to be able to give in return, to demand what you deserve and to put yourself first when necessary. This challenge is the most profound transformation a nice guy can face. Learning to balance kindness with self-confidence, sacrifice with self-care. You must ask yourself, what is at stake when I sacrifice myself for someone without being valued? And more importantly, am I really helping this person by putting myself aside for them? Or am I actually creating a dynamic of dependency, where no one comes away truly satisfied? Changing does not mean ceasing to be who you are, but evolving into a stronger and more balanced version of yourself. Avoiding Myshkin's mistake is about understanding that you deserve as much love and care as those you seek to help. It's about being able to look at yourself and say, I'm important too, I deserve to be seen and heard too. If there is one thing we need to understand in order to overcome the destructive cycle of self-sacrifice, it is that true kindness does not lie in subordinating oneself to the desire to please others. Genuine kindness is not a bargaining chip. It is not a bargaining chip where the price to be paid is the loss of one's own identity. It is born from the ability to balance caring for others with respect and care for oneself. And this begins with a single, powerful principle: self-confidence. Self-confidence is not an empty or superficial concept. It is the ability to trust in your own choices, in your own voice, even when the world around you seems to devalue or ignore you. To find the balance between being good to others and being good to yourself, it is necessary, first of all, to recognize your intrinsic value. And this value does not come from what you do for others, but from who you are, essentially. Kindness and self-confidence, far from being opposites, are two complementary forces. When you learn to trust yourself and your own feelings, you also learn to act more authentically and truthfully towards others. Your kindness then ceases to be an effort to receive something in return and becomes a natural expression of your true nature. Kindness is no longer a burden, but a choice. A choice that is made with clarity and wisdom, knowing when to give and when to preserve yourself. And what is the power of finding this balance? The feeling of inner peace that comes from knowing that you are being true to yourself, without giving up your character or your essence to please others. True kindness does not require excessive sacrifices. It does not bow down to the need for external approval. It is a reflection of self-understanding and self-care. When you are able to take care of yourself, to assert yourself in your truth, your kindness does not lose its strength, but becomes even more powerful. It is not vulnerable, as in Myshkin's case, but rather solid and resilient, a kindness that comes from the deepest and most authentic place of your being. The real challenge, then, is knowing where and how to set your boundaries. This isn't selfishness. It's not about not caring about others or being indifferent. It's about understanding that by taking care of yourself, you're creating a stronger foundation of love and care for others as well. And it's this balance between giving and receiving, between being generous and being firm in your boundaries, that leads to true transformation. No longer a lost nice guy, but a whole human being, with his own voice and presence. When we look at the journey of the nice guy, from the cycle of self-sacrifice to the awakening of inner truth, we realize something fundamental. The story of a nice guy does not have to be a story of loss. The Myshkin tragedy, which we saw earlier, is not the end of the road for those who follow the path of kindness and caring for others. On the contrary, it is simply a painful lesson, a lesson that we can all learn without repeating the same mistakes. The nice guy does not have to lose, but he does have to evolve. He needs to understand that true kindness is not passive. It is not an endless giving that is exhausted and lost. Genuine kindness comes from inner harmony, from the understanding that being good to others begins with being good to yourself. There is no need to sacrifice yourself to be loved. There is no need to lose yourself in the process. The nice guy can and should be respected, but for that to happen, he must learn to respect himself first. The biggest mistake many people make is believing that kindness alone can conquer everything, that the world will respond to their good deeds with recognition and love. The problem arises when this expectation is not met, and the nice guy feels disillusioned, frustrated, and powerless. What we need to understand is that for kindness to be effective and not cause frustration, it needs to be balanced by a strong foundation of self-confidence, self-understanding, and emotional self-sufficiency. True transformation does not happen when you abandon your kindness, but when you integrate it with a deep respect for yourself. In the process, you will realize that you don't have to be cruel to be firm. You don't have to be selfish to be authentic. You can be kind, but also firm. You can be generous, but also know when to say no. The nice guy, who learns to integrate these strengths, to be true to himself while being kind to others, is the one who emerges transformed. He doesn't lose, he evolves. In the end, the nice guy who finds balance is no longer a passive being, living at the mercy of others. He is someone who knows who he is, who knows what he deserves, and who is willing to live according to his own principles and values. He is someone who is not consumed by the incessant search for external approval, but who, on the contrary, radiates confidence and authenticity, thus attracting the relationships and results he truly deserves. The final lesson is simple. The nice guy does not need to lose. He only needs to understand himself, respect himself, and learn to live according to his own truth. In doing so, he will discover that true victory lies not in pleasing others at all costs, but in being truly happy and fulfilled with who he is.